UFC Fight Night, Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 2. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by Zan, I go by Cháirez as usual. Fight by fight breakdown and analysis from that betting perspective specifically. We want to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights to avoid, which underdog has the best shot at winning, and some parlay action toward the end of the video as well. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you follow the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. And when it's all said and done, we're going to want to hear from you in the comments. For this UFC Fight Night event, also known as Noche UFC, we have 11 fights overall. 6 of them are going to be on the prelims, 5 of them on the main card. Let's get started right away with fight number 1 of our prelims. We are looking at Josefine Knutsson versus Marnic Mann, 2 newcomers to the UFC for Knutsson, striker more than anything. Look for a lot of fakes and feints in her style. She's pretty patient. The striking is pretty sharp from what I've seen. From an accolade perspective, she's there, right? She's been a world champion in kickboxing. She's been a world champion in Muay Thai and K1 as well. So legitimate striking credentials. She has that sort of consistent stalking type of pressure, really clean combinations to go along with that. Also looks like she's pretty decent at stopping takedowns as well. So being able to keep fights in her wheelhouse, I should say, which is again her striking. Going up against Marnic Mann, who is introduced as a striker, doesn't really have a commanding style of striking though. She's going to kind of fight off that back foot a lot. She does have decent power with the hands. Half of her wins are via KO, TKO. She does have decent combinations. I do think she's a bit more toughness than technique, though. From a ground game perspective, doesn't look great. It does look like she can be taken down, but she definitely is willing to play that clinch game. And I have seen her land takedowns before, so can potentially mix it up a little bit. On paper, we're looking at a fight between 2 strikers, where one fighter is the much cleaner striker than the other. I would say that Mann is more willing to work the clinch, more willing to work those takedown attempts. But Knutsson has that approach in her as well, stylistically, if she wants to go to that. Otherwise, from a striking perspective, where I anticipate most of this fight actually occurring, I'm much more confident in the ability of Josefine Knutsson. I think that Knutsson striking, like I said, it's more polished. I like her combinations. I think they're better. I like her forward pressure a little bit more. So my pick is going to be Josefine Knutsson to get us started. She's a huge favorite, I think, for a reason, but at the same time, I can't call it a confident pick because ultimately it is 2 newcomers. But when I just break it down analytically, Josefine Knutsson, big favorite for a reason, should get it done, no problem.
Okay, first fight on the card, Josefine Knutsson. I think she's gonna run right through this girl. Josephine, I actually did a breakdown on this fighter versus Isis Verbeek on the Contender Series on August 22nd. I actually did a breakdown on that one. I had to study that fight. I made a bet on that fight. Verbeek was a kickboxer, was supposed to be the more credentialed kickboxer. Knutsson is a kickboxer as well. But Knutsson also has that ground game. Knutsson put a beating on her. Looked really well. I think Knutsson has a ceiling here, a good ceiling. I think she could be something eventually, not at this point, but she definitely has the tools. Very well-rounded ground game. She trains with Chimaev, Kanzan, those guys in Sweden. So she has a good training camp. And if you watch her fights, her striking is very dangerous. She's gonna be the bigger girl as well. Knutsson, I think, runs through Marnic Mann pretty easily here.
Second fight, let's talk Alex Reyes versus Charlie Campbell. For Alex Reyes, he debuted all the way back in 2017. That's actually the last time he fought as well. 36 years old, 6-year layoff, so definitely some red flags right away. The only thing I know about his story is that he had a spinal infection. He was told he may never walk again at the time of that infection. So it's hard to know where he's at now. His style at the time was a bit more unorthodox in terms of his movement. A lot of lateral movement, light on the feet, solid jab, solid striking in general. He had good striking speed again many years ago. And he was good at sort of staying out of the way with that movement as he fights from the outside. I also saw pretty solid grappling out of him. Again, 6 years ago, has a few submissions to his name, 4 of his 13 wins specifically. But again, it's 6 years later. It's off of a major infection. So who knows how he's going to look. He's going up against Charlie Campbell, who's making his UFC debut. You look at his record there, 7-2. 5 of those 7 wins are via KO TKO. From what I've seen from him, solid striking, pretty sturdy, pretty consistent, pretty comfortable in the pocket. He has that sort of explosive power. For the most part, pretty controlled with his striking, but he's not afraid to stand there and bang. Definitely trusts his power, and he's dropped a lot of guys with those big overhands that he has. His power punches have pretty good accuracy on them as well, and he will mix in that calf kick to kind of change up the approach a little bit. For Alex Reyes, you see his record there, 13-3, his 3 losses. It's really only Mike Perry that's his only meaningful loss. This is a fighter who lost his first 2 MMA fights, and then he proceeded to go on a 13-fight winning streak before he took a short notice fight up in a weight class in a co-main event slot against Mike Perry, who, back in 2017 was a name in the UFC. So this is a fighter who just never really got that chance to make a name for himself in the UFC or in MMA in general. What's interesting is that Alex Reyes may be the more skilled fighter. His movement can be a problem. He can strike effectively from the outside. His grappling is more than likely to be more effective as well. But I can't look past a 6-year layoff. I can't look past 36 years old after thinking that you would never walk again. That's not really a winning storyline in my eyes. So, too long of a layoff to compete against a fighter in Charlie Campbell, who's pretty close to athletic prime at 28 years old. In addition to that, Reyes, he had a style that was predicated on a lot of movement. It's hard to know how effective he can be in that style. Again, 6 years later, I keep mentioning that. On top of that, Campbell, he hits hard. And I think Campbell will be able to catch Alex Reyes. I don't know if Alex Reyes will be able to take it. So I do like Charlie Campbell here. I do think a knockout is likely. Don't take that as too much confidence per se. I mean, anything can happen in a fight with a UFC newcomer. But again, I mean, Alex Reyes, that's not really a winning storyline in my eyes. So I think Charlie Campbell gets it done, and I think it's likely that Charlie Campbell gets a finish.
Yeah, the only thing going for Alex Reyes is his brother Dominic Reyes, right? So that's the only thing going for this guy. I wasn't impressed with him 6 years ago, and again now he's much older. I think Charlie Campbell's going to find the chin at some point here. 6 years is a long time. I know Reyes is a coach at that gym he's at. I think it's called Cage Combat Academy. He's a head coach over there. So he should be well versed in every area. He does have jujitsu. I know he won some jujitsu tournaments years ago. But 2023, we don't know what we're getting out of this guy. So you got to go with the Charlie Campbell. But I will say, Charlie Campbell at these odds is pretty reckless. It doesn't matter who he fights. This guy could easily make a mistake. Um, this guy, he had Chris Duncan hurt, and like a second later, he had Chris Duncan wobbly after a hit, and then Chris Duncan just knocked him out. This guy, you can't really trust him at these odds, but I do think Charlie Campbell should definitely get this one done here.
A third fight, Tracy Cortez versus Jasmine Jasudavicius. Tracy Cortez 10-fight winning streak, though she hasn't really fought since May 2022. She beat Melissa Gatto at that time. Good overall stand-up in her style, good movement around the ring. She's light on her feet. She has good fakes and feints, really patient as a striker, and she shows pretty good striking IQ. The game is complete as well. She has good wrestling, she has good takedowns, good top control to go along with that. She can stay out of submission danger. Good scrambler if she's taken down. Just a really well-rounded fighter overall. Going up against Jasmine Jasudavicius, who is on a 2-fight winning streak after beating Miranda Maverick back in June. Decent kickboxer. She wants to stalk her opponents down with her stand-up, regular jab usage included in her game. A lot of fakes and feints as well as she tries to find her timing. Pretty steady, in her pace and her approach. She kind of stays right in front of you as she looks to close distance. And those takedowns, she's well-rounded as well. The takedowns are a part of her game. She is a decent wrestler, 2.2 takedowns per fight. Expect her to find that clinch against the cage. Expect her to try to work the takedowns from there. Expect decent ground and pound out of her, decent top control if she does get you down. I think takedown defense is going to be the key stat on both sides. 71% on the side of Tracy Cortez, 78% on the side of Jasmine Jasudavicius. Better takedown defense, at least on paper, for Jasmine, but I do think that Cortez is the better wrestler here. It's going to be interesting to see how that part of the fight goes, because I do think that will be a key part of the fight. When it comes to the striking, I do believe that Cortez is the better striker of the two, but Jasmine is bigger, right? Jasmine stalks you down. She has that style. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how that part of the fight goes as well. I think either way, you're looking at a really close fight here. The odds, of course, indicate that, but I'm going to trust Tracy Cortez here. I think I can trust her to be more composed in this spot. She's taken on tougher competition. She, was on a 10-fight winning streak. And to me, she's one of those fighters where I know what I'm going to get. Whereas for Jasmine Jasudavicius, maybe a little bit of recency bias. She is solid, but she is also beatable. So my pick is going to be Tracy Cortez. A bit of a gut pick, not to say more than anything, because analytically I like Cortez as well. But I think it's a bit of a gut pick in how comfortable I feel with Tracy Cortez in this fight, despite how close I think it will be. So again, I'm going to go with Tracy Cortez. Close fight, but unanimous decision.
Yeah, this is a tough fight. I really think can go either way. I definitely think the underdog has a solid chance here to win the fight. Jasmine has some good things on her side. She has good cardio. She can put on a pace as well. And again, like Cháirez mentioned, she's the bigger girl. She has some wrestling as well. Her striking's improving. In her last fight against Miranda Maverick, in the third round, her striking she was really putting on the strike, especially in the third round. So she's definitely improving there. I can easily see Tracy Cortez out wrestling her for 2 rounds, winning a 29-28 type of decision. But I can also see Jasmine losing that first round and winning the next 2 rounds with her cardio and her pace. This is a fight I don't have a lean anywhere as far as bets go. It's really a fight that I don't know. I can't really make a decision here because Cortez has been out since what's the year? What was her last fight? I haven't seen her fight in a minute.
March May 2022.
Yeah, so she hasn't fought in a year and a half almost. So I'm not sure, and I know this is not fight related, but she was with Brian Ortega. They split up, so I know a lot of things happen. Like it could affect her. I don't know. It could affect the training she was doing, her mind, her focus. If this was 2 years ago, if this fight was a year and a half ago or a year ago, I definitely got Cortez. But the year and a half is concerning. So again, I don't feel comfortable on either side. I'm going to go with Cháirez on the Cortez, banking on the fact that she should be able to get the first round, still has cardio, get that second, use some top control, get a takedown. And on the feet, her stand-up is serviceable. She's going to be the smaller girl, so she's going to be at a disadvantage. But I think she might be able to duck under some of those shots. She has a really good entry on those takedowns. But again, I don't feel comfortable either way, but Cortez is my pick on a 50-50 fight.
Fight number 4, Edgar Cháirez versus Daniel Lacerda. Flyweight fight here. Cháirez lost his July debut to Tetsuro Taira. 6 of his 10 wins are via submission. That's the first thing to call out in terms of what to expect from him. He does have good fluid movement on the feet. He does have a good calf kick, good jabs, good feints and fakes. The head movement is there. Just solid striking overall. He's going to fight from the outside. He's going to fight from distance. Almost has a style where he's trying to bait you in as a counterpuncher. I wouldn't say the wrestling is good, but the grappling is pretty solid. Remember he had Tetsuro Taira locked up in a few guillotines in their fight, although they were really, sort of high risk, low reward, type of submission attempts, but still had him, right? So that speaks to his ability to find those potential submissions. Daniel Lacerda 0-4 in the UFC now. He lost to CJ Vergara. That was back in March. Really, he's a finish or be finished type of fighter. 16 fights overall, 100% finish rate on both sides, the wins and the losses. He's introduced as a striker. He's a southpaw, pretty comfortable on the feet, sharp with his kicks. His pace is consistent, always pressing forward. I have seen good takedown entries from him. I have seen aggressive ground and pound. That said, only 2 takedowns in 4 UFC fights, so don't really expect it to be a super active part of his game. I've also seen good positional top control from him, good grappling as well in general. BJJ brown belt, but sometimes he overcompensates with his grappling attempts, and it does cost him in those moments. I think it's a very interesting fight here. Cháirez, big favorite in this one. I don't really expect either fighter to be particularly reliable. I definitely understand why Cháirez is the big favorite. I mean, Lacerda, again, 0-4 in the UFC speaks for itself. Now, striking wise, Lacerda is dangerous. He's also more out of control. So he has the power. We saw it in his last fight, despite him losing. That said, despite the 5 losses on the side of Cháirez, he's never been finished, right? So how dangerous will Lacerda striking be if Cháirez has never been finished? We're going to have to see that. Lacerda probably has the better wrestling specifically. I don't think either fighter is better or worse than the other with respect to grappling. So with all that said, again, Cháirez the favorite. I think that has a lot to do with Lacerda's tenure in the UFC thus far. Again, we know Lacerda is dangerous early, but then he fades hard, especially after that first round. So if you're on the betting side of Cháirez, you're ultimately banking on him weathering that early storm, being the more consistent fighter throughout afterward. And that's more than likely what's going to happen. So let me make sure I say that. That said, I'm going to go with the underdog. I'm going to go with Daniel Lacerda here. I think it's do or die for him. I think he needs a win. He's aggressive enough from a striking perspective to be dangerous. He's capable of landing takedowns. I think we see him barely keep his UFC career alive here. Again, 0-4. I've never seen a fighter go 5 losses in a row and still last in the UFC. So he's going to need a win here. And somehow I feel he's going to get it. So Daniel Lacerda, don't follow me on this one, but he's going to be my pick on this.
Okay, this is an interesting fight. Lacerda, this guy, 0-4 in the UFC, terrible. But I actually think this guy is the better, based on visuals, based on skills, the striking, the jiu-jitsu. I just feel like he's a higher level of striking than Edgar Cháirez. I think he has better jiu-jitsu as well. I think he's the more dangerous grappler. I think they both can grapple. They both can catch the other. But I just think that Lacerda has a higher pedigree in the striking, especially much faster, very technical striker. And I just feel like he is the better guy. But a big but is the cardio. I looked at a lot of fights on this guy. I couldn't find every single fight. But even going back 2017, I don't think this guy went out of the first round. I didn't see one fight out of the first round with this guy. And if it like the fights that went out of the first round in the UFC, he lost. In the UFC, he went out of the first round twice. He lost both of those fights against Molina, a fight he was winning the first round, and a fight versus Vergara, a fight he was destroying Vergara in that first round. I'm not sure if this guy's smoking cigarettes. I'm not sure, but his cardio is terrible. I think he's the better guy, but his cardio is hard. Like this guy has quit in fights, even against the fight that made me realize this is not the guy. Let me check here. Was against Francisco Figueiredo. Francisco Davison Figueiredo's brother, known as a striker. This guy put this guy in a knee bar. There was no fight to get out. Like there's no. I just don't believe in this guy, man. I think he has all the skills in the world, but I just don't think that his focus is in the right place. I don't think he's putting enough focus into the MMA game here. The fact that he can't go 5 rounds, like you're a professional fighter, and after 5 rounds you're tired and you can't go any longer. Something's wrong, and I can't bet on that. Even though I think he's the more skilled guy. Cháirez, he's never been finished by strikes. If he survives that first round, based on history, he should be able to cruise the next 2 rounds. So I'm going to go with Edgar Cháirez, and I wouldn't be surprised. Edgar, he has power, a sneaky left hook. I wouldn't be surprised. He has good boxing. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets his hands on, put some hands on Lacerda and finishes him in that first round. But if not, I think as the fight goes on, Lacerda's cardio problems are going to show. I got to go with the Mexican that I think is going to be looking good in the second and third. So I'm going to go Edgar Cháirez to dog it out and win the second and third, or get a finish at some point.
Fight number 5 of our prelims, Roman Kopylov versus Josh Fremd. Kopylov 3-fight winning streak, beating Claudio Ribeiro back in July. He's a southpaw on the feet. He's really disciplined with his striking, has good IQ on the feet, fights at a good distance with good movement, really patient with his striking. He does a good job at setting things up, good long jab, good calf kick, has some striking speed, has pretty solid combinations, and it really just has that fluidity to his striking. Really good at keeping fights on the feet as well. Good takedown defense at 89%. Doesn't really do it often, but he is also capable of landing the takedowns offensively. We see the numbers there at half a takedown per fight. So again, don't really expect that to be an active part of his game. Josh Fremd, 2-fight winning streak, unanimous decision win over Jamie Pickett. That was just last month. So getting right back in there. Decent jab, likes to come forward, picks his shots pretty well, has decent timing, decent technique. Doesn't really go at a crazy pace by any means, but he does have good toughness, good consistency in terms of that pace. Also has good power, good sting on his punches. He is a bit one-dimensional otherwise. Pretty much going to rely on that striking to get him wins. He did wrestle in high school. He has landed 3 takedowns in 4 UFC fights. But don't really expect that to be too much of an active part of his game. Also has horrible takedown defense. So I'm looking at a fight here where I think it stays standing pretty much the entire fight. And I think it's going to be a good fight, but it's also going to be a fight where I think Kopylov is a relatively comfortable pick for me. Now, the way I see it, again, both guys are capable strikers, but Kopylov, flat out higher level striker, cleaner striker, more polished, more capable, more diverse in his attack. Kopylov, I think, can also land takedowns should he need to, going back to Josh Fremd's horrible takedown defense. And Josh Fremd, someone who maybe might attempt to take down, I think Kopylov will do a good job at being able to defend it. And again, I just think Kopylov has more ways to win the fight. Fremd does have good power, but only 4 of his 11 wins are via KO, TKO. So I'm not expecting him to be some sort of huge power threat where Kopylov is just not going to be able to take that punch at all. So I think that Kopylov should be able to at least take whatever Fremd has to offer while being able to do more on the feet, while being able to potentially land takedowns, while successfully defending takedowns. And again, just really doing it all from a scorecard perspective. So I like Kopylov to get the job done here. Will he finish it? I don't know. Will he win? I do think so. Kopylov is my pick.
Okay, so Kopylov, I've been liking the way he's been looking lately in his fights. If you watch him from the Carl Robeson-Duraev, and then you watch him in the Soriano-Ribeiro fight, he's a completely different guy. He clearly leveled up. He's doing something different, and it's definitely showing in his fights here. On the feet, Kopylov is dangerous. He looks for the finish at some point. Dangerous, fast hands, sets it up well, good kicks. This fight, I think Josh is gonna have to get this to the ground. Gonna have to make this a grappling match. On the feet, I think Kopylov is just too dangerous on the feet. He's gonna have more power. He's gonna have more technique, more skill. At some point, he's gonna knock this guy out, man. I like Josh Fremd. He's a big guy, 6'4" middleweight. That's going for him. The submission game is going for him as well. But he doesn't have the best wrestling. He can grapple, he can wrestle, but he doesn't have the best wrestling to make me feel that he's gonna be able to get Kopylov down whenever he wants. So if he has to stay on the feet with Kopylov doesn't throw 40% power punches. He puts in at least 60, 70, 80% in his shots, and he's very selective in his shots. He's very accurate. I think he gets it done as well. Odds aren't the greatest as far as making money on this fight. But I don't see how Kopylov doesn't win this fight. So I'm going to go Roman Kopylov getting a knockout at some point.
Final fight of the prelims. Let's talk Lupita Godinez versus Elise Reed. Women's strawweight fight here. Godinez beat Emily Ducote. That was back in May. Good on paper across the board. She has the boxing skills. She has decent movement, good accuracy on her punches. She throws good combinations. She's going to put that pressure on and look to close distance. And she has the good wrestling skills to go along with that. Good takedown defense on top of that. Going back to the offensive part of her wrestling, she's willing to stay committed to that takedown attempt. She's going to work that clinch against the cage if she can't land the takedown. But we see those takedown numbers there at almost 3.5 per fight. So that lets you know how capable she is of landing them. And again, really just a solid all-around fighter. Going up against Elise Reed, unanimous decision win over Jinh Yu Frey back in June. She likes to keep the fight on the feet. She's patient. She has solid striking IQ, very light on her feet, and she can be really tricky. Good kicks overall. She can definitely catch her opponents off guard, well-timed, right straight as well as part of her game. She's going to blitz in on her opponents with flurries, with combinations. Otherwise, expect her to use that lateral movement to fight from a distance, right? So kind of lull you to sleep, lateral movement, and then make that flurry inside, land the combinations, and then wash, rinse, repeat is kind of the style to expect from her. She's landed 3 takedowns in 6 UFC fights, so it's not really an active part of her game. Also, the key thing for her, horrible takedown defense at just 50%. I think that's something really key to note in this fight specifically. I think that is the key stat for this fight. From a striking perspective, I do think that both of them can be effective. Godinez doesn't really have the best striking defense. Godinez has that consistent forward pressure, the boxing as well. Reed has that kickboxing. Reed has that movement. So both fighters have that ability, and both fighters are kind of hittable, right? So both of them should be able to have moments on the feet. But again, Godinez, big favorite for a reason. I think there's a big gap in the ground game. Godinez likes to spam those takedowns, and I don't think Elise Reed is going to be able to defend them. I can anticipate a good amount of top control for Lupita Godinez, plus Elise Reed. She gasses out, right? So I can see the fight completely being lopsided in Lupi's favor in that second round, in that third round, because again, I think Godinez just has more of that fight in her. Where there is caution here is that sometimes Godinez underperforms, right? Sometimes she's in close fights that she should be winning, but I think Elise Reed is going to be a very beatable opponent here for her. So Lupita Godinez is going to be my pick. I would think twice before throwing this on a lotto or on a parlay, but she should get it done. I don't see how Lupita Godinez loses this fight unless she just flat out underperforms. So Lupi's going to be my pick, but some cautions on the fighter.
Yeah, no, Lupi's gonna run through this girl, Elise Reed. Elise Reed looks good at certain moments in the fight. She can counter at certain points. She's gonna have her moments. She's gonna throw nice. She's gonna land pretty shots. But she's not gonna keep it going. And Lupi's gonna have a more consistent attack with the striking. Elise Reed, I think, has the better counters. Will be able to counter Lupi coming in if she just wants to come in with that jab, which I see her use a lot. Sets up the 1-2. But I could see Elise Reed countering. I could see her definitely looking good at certain points in each round. But her takedown defense is going to be tested here. She's been taken down 3 times by Jinh Yu Frey, twice by Loma Lookboonmee, once by Melissa Martinez, 4 times Sammy Hughes, 3 times Corey McKenna, 1 time Eubanks, but Eubanks just needed 1 time to finish the fight. So Lupi, I think, has good wrestling. I think Lupi's going to have a big advantage in the grappling area. The stand-up is going to be pretty close, but Lupi's going to be able to win this fight. There's something going on. This is a Mexican favored card. A lot of Mexican fighters. There's some type of UFC is doing something. I don't remember what it's called, but they're doing something for the Mexican fighters. So they're giving them matchups that they can win, and this is clearly a fight that it's all on to Lupi if she loses here. It's Lupi's better, is gonna be able to dictate the fight, better cardio. I like Lupi here in this spot.
Let's move on then to our main card. Again, we have 5 fights on the main card. Fight number one, Fernando Padilla versus Kyle Nelson. Padilla's on a 3-fight winning streak. He beat Julian Erosa in his April debut, which is a pretty solid win. He's a finisher. 15 wins, 13 finishes, 8 submission, 5 KO, TKO, including that last fight. Striking is really patient. He's tall, he's long, he's a rangy fighter. He's got good power, good regular jab to set things up. Combinations are really solid as well. Look for really good controlled technique out of Fernando Padilla. Kyle Nelson, on the other hand, had a unanimous decision win over Blake Builder back in June. He's introduced as a jiu-jitsu and a kickboxing fighter. Decent striking, good power, good combinations. Fairly basic in his striking, though. His approach is fairly straightforward. I'll say he puts a lot into his strikes. He can definitely be dangerous. And he can land those takedowns, right? 1.3 takedowns per fight doesn't really make it an active part of his game, but he can implement it. I've seen it before. And then again, he's introduced as a jiu-jitsu fighter, so definitely comfortable on the mat. When I look at this fight, I'm seeing a close one, despite the odds being more in favor of the Mexican for the Mexican event, as you just mentioned. I'm looking at a fight where both fighters can do a bit of everything, right? I favor Padilla's striking. I think his patient style with his good power can be a problem for Kyle Nelson's relatively more basic style of striking. Nelson has also been finished before. And just like Padilla's last fight, Padilla has that power to end it quickly. I think we can, I think we most likely see that type of finish for this one. I do think Kyle Nelson's a good scrapper, good scrappier fighter. He has that ability to work that clinch. He's not afraid to engage. He's not afraid to march you down. But I don't think that those factors are going to be enough for Kyle Nelson. So I like Padilla here because of that striking, because of the size, because of the length. I feel it's going to be hard for Kyle Nelson to get in, to land, to get in and land with any level of consistency. And I don't think that Nelson will be able to land takedowns, or at least land them easily because of his style, but also because of Padilla's size. So Padilla is going to be my pick here. Again, you mentioned it in the last fight with Lupi Godinez. I think for this event, Mexican fighters are getting very winnable fights. I think this is a winnable fight for Fernando Padilla. And again, a knockout would not surprise me. He has the power to do it. And Kyle Nelson is a relatively basic fighter. So my pick is going to be Fernando Padilla. I might look at a finish, but let's just pick him for the win for now.
Yeah, there's things to like about both guys in this fight. Kyle Nelson, he's a vet, right? He has the experience against higher level fighters. He's gonna have I think he's gonna have the wrestling advantage. He's gonna be able to get takedowns, and if his cardio holds up, that could be a good path here in this fight. Because I don't think Padilla has the best takedown defense on the mat, though. I think Padilla is very dangerous with his jiu-jitsu. He has arm chokes, arm triangle chokes. He has triangle chokes as well. This guy has good jiu-jitsu, but he also has a lot of finishes with his hands. He has knockouts. But the concerning thing on the Padilla side, as good as he's looked, he beat Julian Erosa, but we know Erosa doesn't have the best chin. But he beat him as an underdog, and he has a loss against Spike Carlisle. I know that was back in 2019, but Spike Carlisle, man, that's a concern. Where this guy's a big favorite in this fight against the Canadian here. I think he's going to win the fight because Kyle Nelson has a bad chin. He can't really take shots. And obviously, Padilla's looking for that knockout. He's going to be the better striker. I could see Kyle Nelson looking good in that first round, winning that first round. But he also has cardio problems as well as chin issues. So after that first round, it's going to be hard for him to get those takedowns. And if the fight's still going on, Padilla's going to connect. He's going to land something dangerous. So I'm going to go with Padilla in this fight. Basing it off of Kyle Nelson's cardio isn't that good. His heart is not the greatest, and his chin is a liability. So I'm going to go with the favorite, Fernando Padilla.
Let's talk fight number 2, and let's talk Daniel Zellhuber versus Christos Giagos. Zellhuber had a unanimous decision win over Lando Venata back in April. Good win for him there. Tall, long for the division. He has solid Muay Thai. Fights from range with that longer reach. We see for this fight 5.5 inches in reach, another 3 inches in height. The striking is pretty solid, just overall. Good long jab, good combinations, good striking technique. He's very patient as a striker, almost too patient. Good chin when he does decide to mix it up, though, so he can definitely go shot for shot. Good power. 7 of his 13 wins via KO, TKO. I have seen him land takedowns as well, though I will say it's not really a go-to part of his game. He's also good at keeping fights on the feet, from what I've seen, being able to stop takedowns. And I mean, still just 24 years old, right? So he's always improving on a fight over fight basis. But this is a fighter who is already dangerous in his style with his size in this division. Christos Giagos beat Ricky Glenn back in April. He's a switch stance fighter. He's introduced as a boxer wrestler. He's going to fight from the outside, a lot of fakes, a lot of feints, decent use of that jab. Showed his striking, showed his power in his last fight. He can also close distance quickly. He can also be very explosive and be dangerous from that perspective. And Giagos, I mean, the name of the game is the takedowns, right? He has good wrestling, chain wrestling, body locks. He's going to press you against the cage, really just try to, get you to the ground by any means possible. And he can grapple as well to pair along with that wrestling. We look at this fight, Daniel Zellhuber, pretty sizable favorite here, I think, for a reason. I think, he is expected to win, but this can be a dangerous fight, right? I think both fighters are capable fighters in general. Ultimately, I think Zellhuber has to be the pick, though, right? I mean, the striking is better. I think he's more capable as a striker, in addition to those physical advantages that I mentioned. I don't see Giagos having consistent opportunities to land cleanly on Zellhuber here. And yes, Giagos does have the ground advantage, the wrestling advantage, the grappling advantage as well. But like I mentioned, Zellhuber is pretty good at defending those takedowns. So I think this fight stays on the feet. And although I think Giagos can be dangerous, I think that Zellhuber, gets the better of the striking exchanges throughout the fight, and Giagos just won't be able to keep up. So Zellhuber is going to be my pick for this one. I think, that Lando Venata win was a good one for him. And, I think he just goes up from there. So Daniel Zellhuber, I think, gets the job done.
Okay, just like the Kyle Nelson fighter, I think Christos Giagos similar, were great in that first round, and then after the first round, they definitely are not the same. They really do slow down. Giagos not as bad as Kyle Nelson, but he definitely slows down. So I can see Giagos utilizing or trying to utilize grappling, looking good in that first round. But again, as the fight goes on, I think Zellhuber, good cardio, he's going to keep it going. Zellhuber is really good at range. He's a taller guy. He fights. He's good at fighting at distance and using his reach and keeping you at the end of his punches. Also helps him prevent some of these takedowns because he's not that close. And Giagos is a guy that I don't think has the best inside fighting. And I think if you're going to strike with Zellhuber, you got to have that inside game, that phone booth style, or not even that, just inside striking. And if you don't have that, Zellhuber is going to be able to keep you at the end of his punches. And I think that's going to happen in this fight. If Zellhuber doesn't get finished in that first round, Giagos is going to have a hard time with the grappling. And then he's going to be at a disadvantage on the feet. Zellhuber is the more active striker. I think at some point he's going to get a finish here. And yeah, another fight where the UFC is giving a Mexican fighter a very winnable fight. And you got to realize that the last card in France, I believe every French fighter won. And I think it was the second time in a row in France it happened. I may have to look that up, but it's real that they actually do give these guys favorable fights. And like the French going undefeated at home the last two events. Again, I got to check the other event. It's pretty crazy, right? So I think this is another fight that the Mexican fighter has advantages, and I think he should get this done.
Fight number 3 of our main card. Let's talk Raul Rosas Jr. versus Terrence Mitchell. For Rosas Jr., he lost to Christian Rodriguez. That was back in April. On the feet, switch stance. He's quick. He's going to commit to that forward pressure. That striking can be a bit inconsistent. It's something that he is constantly improving. The name of the game with Rosas, though, is the wrestling. He's committed to it. Continuous takedown attempts, great positional improvement, great strength already at his age, just 18 years old, of course. He's going to chain those wrestling attempts together. And just from a numbers perspective, he's landed 5 takedowns in 2 UFC fights thus far. So he is able to do it at this level. The grappling is good as well. It's going to lead to good control time for him, good submission attempts for him as well. And again, very young as a fighter, right? He's someone who's still going to make mistakes. He's someone who is still going to, telegraph those takedown attempts, but it's going to be someone who is improving tremendously on a fight over fight basis. Taking on Terrence Mitchell, who lost to Cameron Simon in his July debut. He's a quick starter. He's going to force the pace a bit. Doesn't really have the cleanest technique, but he's athletic. He's explosive in terms of that striking, in terms of having that ability to work his way in, to close distance. And I've seen him land takedowns, right? He did land one in his debut. I've seen him I should say, have decent top control to go along with those takedowns. I've seen him be able to find submissions as well, right? 8 of his 14 wins are via submission. So he definitely has that in him. Really, for this fight, I mean, you're looking at two fighters who don't really have the most polished game. I think the difference is Rosas Jr., 18 years old, right? He's making significant improvements. Terrence Mitchell, 33 years old. He's likely going to have the same game that he did 2 months ago when he fought last versus Cameron Simon. So Rosas Jr., big favorite for a reason. I think, of course, he has to be the pick here. I think, again, going back to the Mexican setup for this event, going to be a very winnable fight for him. But, there's some danger here, right? Because, again, he's not really the most polished fighter. He can make mistakes. Luckily for him, Terrence Mitchell is not really a UFC level fighter. So I do expect Rosas Jr. to be able to land those takedowns. I do think they will work. I do think Rosas Jr. will be able to find a submission in this fight. I expect early action on both sides, but I also expect an early finish from Raul Rosas Jr. So again, luckily for him, it's going to be more time for him to develop against a fighter who is probably not UFC level. And I think Raul Rosas Jr. is going to make it look pretty easy as a result. So he will be my pick. I will not be parlaying this because I can't depend on an 18-year-old unpolished fighter.
Yeah, this is going to be a wash. Raul Rose is going to run through this guy, man. Terrence Mitchell is not that guy, man. They're setting this guy up. This guy has really no wins on his record, good wins, and this guy is on a main card in the UFC. So he's brought in literally to showcase Raul Rosa. The UFC messed up. In Raul Rosa's last fight, they gave him a really good fighter that was able to hang around and put a beating on Raul in that fight. The UFC did a better job in picking an opponent for this 18-year-old that they wanna grow. They want to raise this guy. They want to start him out. They got to start him out slow though, and this is the type of fight that you're giving him a fighter that is not really known for knocking people out, basically known for submissions and yeah, this guy doesn't have power. And Raul Rosa is going to be the far better wrestler. And not only that, Raul Rosa is a dangerous submission. Has dangerous submissions, has dangerous grappling. It's not just the wrestling. She has good jujitsu, really high level. I think he's going to walk through this guy. And the UFC did a good job giving him a guy that is going to make him look good on this Mexican card. So I like Raul Rosa here to run through Terrence Mitchell.
Let's move on then to our co-main event of the evening. We have Kevin Holland versus Della Maddalena. Probably the most difficult fight for me to call on this card. I will preface with that. Kevin Holland's on a 2-fight winning streak, beating Michael Chiesa back in July. Good kickboxing. We know he's going to use all of his length. He's quick on the feet. He has solid striking IQ. He has good striking speed as well. He has that effective side kick to keep distance. Really good jab, good counter punching ability, I should say. Good counter punching timing. He's going to mix up that offense really well. Plus, he can be explosive, right? Legitimate grappler as well. BJJ black belt, cannot take away from his ground IQ, even though we know his biggest weakness is that takedown defense, just 53%. But it is something that he's working on. He does have that ability to keep fights on the feet. And again, he does have that ground IQ to scramble, to work his way back up if he is taken down. Della Maddalena, split decision win versus Basil Hafez back in July. clean striking, good jab, good combinations, good striking IQ, clean movement. He can switch stance. He has good in and out movement. He sets things up really well and really just has a high level of technique in his style. He also has a judo background. He also used to play rugby, so that's going to speak to, some of that toughness ability that he has, some of that durability that he has, some of that sort of clinch and takedown ability that he has. I would say the wrestling IQ is there, but he's very much a striker. I mean, you don't really expect him to take the fight to the mat. Also, 11 of his wins are via KO, TKO, 11 of his 15 wins. So got to watch out for that power and that finishing ability as well. We know that Della Maddalena didn't really have the best showing in his last fight. He was a huge favorite and only won a split decision in that one, although he clearly won the fight. He was taken down 3 times in that fight, despite having historically good takedown defense. Now, luckily for Maddalena, Holland doesn't really land takedowns. So I'm looking at a fight that pretty much is going to be a striking match, right? Still going to be a very close fight. Still going to be a fight where both fighters are going to have, sort of ways to win and reasons to be on either side. I think Kevin Holland has key height and reach advantages. I'd say that Holland is also quicker on the feet. Maddalena, again, doesn't really land takedowns. So, again, expected to stay on the feet. Again, really close one because despite the advantages that I mentioned for Holland, I think that Maddalena has the advantage of being the more consistent striker, the striker with a higher level of output, a higher level of activity, the fighter that's going to sort of put the fight on you. And like I mentioned, at the onset, this was the toughest one for me on the card because I've been going back and forth. I really do want to think that Holland wins here because of that speed advantage, because of the height and reach advantage. But I think we see some similarities in this fight from the Jack Della Maddalena fight versus Randy Brown. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Maddalena gets a knockout here. I'm also thinking about Maddalena's ability to patiently assess how to get in on that longer, trickier, faster style. Being the sturdier fighter coming forward, eventually finding those openings, eventually finding that ability to implement his offense. So I think it's going to be highly competitive. I think it'll be a split decision type of fight, but I'm slightly leaning in favor of Jack Della Maddalena to get the job done here. But I think it's, maybe 55-45 or maybe 60-40 at best. I think it's going to be a really close one. But again, my coin is going to land on Jack Della Maddalena.
Yeah, this is my main event. This is my favorite fight on this card. Holland's gonna be the bigger guy, and he has that reach, and he has a really good quick jab, really fast 1-2. So he's good at fighting at range, and he should utilize that range. But I think Jack is gonna be able to get on the inside, get those body shots going. This guy has deadly body shots, and I think the body is gonna be there to be hit on Holland. Holland does have good movement. Holland is pretty quick on his feet. But I just see Jack being the more dynamic striker out of the two. Holland does have the physical advantages, but I think Jack's going to have the bigger moments. I can see Holland maybe landing more strikes with those jabs, with the activity, landing some good jabs, but I could definitely see Jack landing those bigger shots in each round, the ones that get the crowd going. That's going to sway the judges. So I do like Jack Maddalena, and as well, as Jack goes up in the ranks, I think Jack has some wrestling that he can show, right? So I think early on in the UFC, get your name out, get those nice finishes. But at this point, he just has to win these fights, and he's marching up the ranks. I think in this fight, we might see some grappling out of Jack, because I know Jack has some grappling. And if he does, I think he would be. I think he is the better wrestler out of the two. We just haven't seen it. We're basing his last fight. He wrestled like a monster. That guy was a monster wrestler that would take down almost anyone in that division. So I didn't really take much out of that because he was fighting a really high level wrestler. I think Jack in this fight has the wrestling advantage, and the boxing. I think the boxing is in a showcase here. He's going to get on the inside, get some body shots going. And I think he's going to hurt Holland, man. Holland has never been finished by strikes. I'm not saying it's going to happen this week, but I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm going to go Della Maddalena to stay winning in the UFC.
Let's move on then to our main event. We have Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. This is a rematch. Their last fight was back in March. We know that, of course, Grasso got the better of that one, choked out Valentina, won the title. But let's talk about each fighter first. Grasso, clean boxer, high-level boxer, good accurate boxing, good jab, good controlled pace. She's a good counter puncher. She's has sharp combinations, even in those counter situations. She can switch stance. She has a decent calf kick. She picks her shots really well. She's really high striking IQ. Good distance control, good striking defense. Just half a takedown per fight, so not really an active part of her game. Also, sort of a weakness in her game is just 64% takedown defense. She does have the ability to fight takedowns. It is pretty solid. Her guard is pretty solid. She doesn't really take too much damage. But again, 64% on paper, it is a little bit concerning, especially going up against Valentina Shevchenko, who is capable of landing takedowns and who will use them as part of her game. We know with Shevchenko, the striking is world class, Muay Thai style, methodical, great timing, great combinations. She's very dynamic with her striking selection, super patient as well. I mentioned those takedowns for her, over 2.5 per fight, 64% on the accuracy side of things. So that basically, once she goes for it, she's going to get it. And she has good top control to go along with that. And we know for Valentina, cardio is just not a concern whatsoever, as she's been a 5-round fighter for a very long time. Like I mentioned, the last fight was in March. Interesting thing about Valentina Shevchenko, I mean, I've picked her every single time I've studied her, right? Whether it's a close fight, whether she loses, whether she wins. I have to admit that she's definitely slowing down at 35 years old. Either that or the other top fighters in the division are really starting to catch up. We saw it with Tyler Santos. We saw it, we've seen Alexa Grasso beat her now at this point, and now she is fighting for the title rather than being a long reigning champion. In their first fight, I mentioned that Alexa Grasso lacks the tools to present a major threat to Valentina. I mentioned that Grasso didn't really have the ground game to take Valentina down. I mentioned that Grasso isn't really that one punch power threat. Yet somehow Grasso got the submission finish. But if we look at the fight for what it was, Valentina landed more strikes. Valentina was the more diverse striker. Valentina landed the takedowns. And the fact is, Valentina got caught. She got caught making a mistake with that spin kick. There is a legitimate reason to go with Grasso. Grasso, an underdog as a champion. She has a number of improvements that she can make from that first fight. And with that championship status, or with that champ status, I should say, I can see her implementing those improvements, right? Kind of think like when Brandon Moreno became champion and all of a sudden just became a super complete fighter. I can see those same types of things happening with Alexa Grasso, and especially as an underdog, there definitely is betting value on her. I'm thinking that striking activity can increase for her. I'm thinking the consistency with the forward pressure could be better for her in this fight, keeping Valentina off of that back foot. But ultimately, I'm gonna go with Shevchenko again, because I think that if she didn't make that mistake in the first fight, she may have been on her way to a victory, right? I have to think that this time around she's going to be smarter, or at least more mindful, not to make those mistakes. I think she's going to be hungrier. I think she's going to be more consistent in implementing takedowns while being the more active striker throughout this fight. I will say this though, a close fight on Noche UFC on this card that favors Mexicans, a close fight is going to favor Grasso, right? To be the champ, you got to beat the champ type of idea. But I do think that Valentina Shevchenko has the ability to make it clear enough on the scorecards where you can't really judge it any other way. So I'm going to go Valentina to get the job done here. Obviously, I favor Valentina in pretty much all of her fights. So maybe a little bit of caution with respect to bias there, but Valentina is going to be my pick. I think she becomes the women's flyweight champ again and gets the job done.
Okay, main event time. This is a great one. Grasso defending her title. First fight. That's what I basically watched many times over and over and over again. And I have to love the boxing from Grasso. I think Grasso's boxing was pretty much beating Shevchenko. Shevchenko was the one of the best strikers of all time, women's. And she was losing that striking, and that's something that doesn't usually happen in her fights, or doesn't happen in her fights. Even in her fights versus Nunes, it was kind of back and forth with the striking. But I'm telling you, man, that first round, Grasso was looking good, and Grasso needs to keep this on the feet, because in that first fight, the grappling from Shevchenko banked her two quick rounds. The second, I think it was the second, the third round, utilized that grappling. And then as the fight was going, takedowns were getting harder, and Grasso was showcasing that striking, that advantage that I didn't know was there. I had Shevchenko the first fight, and I thought she was going to make easy work out of Grasso with her striking, with her wrestling. But what I found out was that Grasso is no joke. This girl can box, and it's when they're exchanging. Shevchenko will throw a 1-2, but Grasso will throw a 1-2-3-4, and she's quick. She's really quick, and every time she throws, she's back in the right stance that you should be in to throw the next shot. So she has good boxing fundamentals for the UFC, and I think in this fight she's gonna have the better hands. I think Shevchenko has the better kicks. Shevchenko is going to have the wrestling advantage in this fight as well. This being another one of those Mexican fighters, UFC obviously is not pulling any shenanigans here. This is a championship fight. This is the number one and the number two going at it. So there's no shenanigans in this fight with the UFC matchmaking. These are the best in this division fighting for the title. But I still got to go with the Mexican fighter, Grasso. I think she just needs to improve the takedown defense. I think if she can fix that, I think her hands are enough. And I expect Grasso to improve a lot. She's young, in her prime. Shevchenko is looking older. She's looking a bit slower. And her striking really good, but these other female fighters are now catching up. Years ago, there was only a handful of female fighters that threw punches like men. Now, a lot of them do. And everything's improving now. I think this could be a passing of the torch. I know Grasso won, but people are looking at that error. It was a mistake, and then she jumped on her back, got the submission. I think this fight could be a fight that Grasso shows everyone the first fight wasn't a fluke, makes improvements. I think she's going to make improvements as well. And I think she's going to get it done here and stay champion. So I'm going to go with the underdog, Alexa Grasso, to keep the GOAT away. I think she gets it done.
All right, let's take it to Vegas. Let's consider some underdogs. Let's consider some favorites. Let me, of course, read them out. First, from an underdog status, Marnic Mann is an underdog versus Josefine Knutsson. Alex Reyes is an underdog versus Charlie Campbell. Jasmine Jasudavicius is an underdog. Daniel Lacerda is the underdog. Josh Fremd, Elise Reed, Kyle Nelson, Christos Giagos, Terrence Mitchell, Kevin Holland, and Alexa Grasso.
Oh, my bad. I'm going with Alexa Grasso, underdog pick.
All right, Alexa Grasso, main event, champion to stay the champ. My underdog pick, not a confident one, but again, I think Daniel Lacerda, I think you made some great points on this one. Probably the better fighter on paper, just really unreliable. But I think he can get it done in that first round. So he's going to be my underdog pick. And in terms of parlay, who are you potentially looking at?
Okay, parlay action. I gotta flip, man. It's a lot of these. There's a lot of big favorites, but I'm gonna roll with Josefine Knutsson, Roman Kopylov, Lupita Godinez, and Raul Rosa Jr.
There's Kopylov right there. So those four fights, like you mentioned, just over a flip, 2.08. That means that $100 will get you a total return of $200 for our bigger bettors. $250 will get you a total return of 522. I think to your point of the bigger favorites, this is probably the way you want to go. Pick four fights that you're going to be comfortable with. I do think that they exist on this card. I'm going to take a slightly different approach. The only overlapping fight that we have is Roman Kopylov. On top of that, I'm going to go with Daniel Zellhuber, and got to go with the gut. Got to go with the gut. I think you mentioned this as well. If this fight was a year and a half ago, you'd feel a lot more confident about it. I'm still going to hold on to that confident status, and I'm going to go with Tracy Cortez. So those three fights would be a 3.21. That means that $100 will return a total of 321, and for our bigger bettors, $250 will return a total of 803. So let's wrap it up on that note. This has been UFC Fight Night. Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 2, presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Again, please be sure to hit the thumbs up on this video if you've made it this far. We definitely appreciate that. Please subscribe to the channel as well here at Boxing MMA Picks. And most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. How do you feel about our underdogs? How do you feel about our parlays? What parlays are you potentially considering? What additional props are you potentially considering? Let that all be known in the comments below, and we're more than happy to have that conversation with you. Officially signing off, this has been UFC Fight Night. Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 2. Full prediction card video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by Zan, I go by Cháirez. In our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's get it.